Welcome to the Perceptions Today podcast, where we discuss consciousness in all forms. January 2022, episode 8, Paranormal Blip, joins us for a Reincarnation Roundtable, part 1 of 4. Paranormal Blip is a podcast discussing all areas of the paranormal.
My mum was, she wasn't really a kind of, well, she had out-of-body experiences. She had a strange connection with electricity. So, for instance, a digital watch would just mess up on her wrist. And other watches, even like the other watches, whatever they run from, I have no idea. There's plenty of people who know about how a watch runs.
Piezo, quartz, electric.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So any watch would just like muck up on her wrist, basically.
This is an instance of the conversation coming up in the roundtable discussion. Participants knew it was being recorded.
Welcome to Perceptions Today. It's the 23rd of November, our Twitter Space chat number 13, and it will be discussing reincarnation and the children that time forgot. Our guest speaker and community member is Pete, who hosts Paranormal Blip, which is a podcast covering the phenomenon of UFO and paranormal activity around the world. I'm your host, Perceptions Today, known as Paul, and your co-host is Centered Awareness, known as Melissa. At this point, Melissa will come off mute and say hello. It says so in the script.
Hi, everybody. I waved. Did you see my animation, my animated wave?
I was looking at the script. I'll now go back to script. So, as I said before, the recording is in progress. So do not divulge anything you do not want to be used, as this may be used in clips or part of a podcast for Paranormal Blip or ourselves as Perceptions Today. As you know, if you've seen, it's all about consciousness and different subjects within that. And you will also see that if there's any problems, please send direct messages to either myself or my co-host, Centered Awareness, so that we can deal with these things. I think everyone's quite happy so far with what we're doing. And for the new people who haven't been using the icons before, nice to see agreement there, Renegade. We tend to use, when it comes down to the heart symbol, which gives you the options to see more, one of those symbols is a peace sign. What we're going to use that for is we cannot talk at present. If I ask you a question, you may be at work, you might not be able to just get to the phone, or you don't want to speak entirely. Again, if you put the hand up, that's for you want to talk and add a question or some information. And when you do that for the first time, if you feel free, you can actually do, say, a 30-second introduction of yourself, along with all the information or a combination of both. Also, when it comes to the fist symbol, we're going to use that as agree. But if you really strongly agree, use the 100% symbol. The laughing face will be used when everybody's making a mistake. Now, that tends to be me when I stumble over words. And if you just want to wave to people, use the waving hand. If you like the content that's being discussed, you could also leave a comment in the Perceptions Today Twitter account. And if you want to be involved more with the account, or you find other people in the group that are of interest, follow them. I will be mentioning along the lines of different people who have got different aspects. For example, Mike Fito is an author who I'd recommend going chasing onto his bio and following him through all his social media. Jared, you have a question? Jared, you had your hand up.
Seems like Gerald is connecting on my screen here. Yeah.
And because this is live, these are the kind of things that we tend to deal with. We will also find that that's pretty minor compared to what we've had to deal with before. And maybe Gerald will be able to make it back in, which should be good. Now, the structures of tonight's dialogue will be just going to tell you some of the forthcoming events, what's going on. So, for example, on the 15th of December, we have a 5-hour Twitter Space event with the author and researcher Anthony Peake, which will be a meet and greet with questions and answers. That will be from the UK time, 9 a.m. to 11 a.m., and then from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. So if you want to come along, grab yourself some questions or catch a few podcasts or even some of the videos on his YouTube channel and come and talk to him, which would be great. Also, there will be a break in our schedule of scheduled Twitter Spaces. So we will then resume on the 6th of January with Stephanie Quick talking of synchronicities. Then we will have on 2022 to be confirmed, will be our guest. Again, you will find her as Imaginal Traveller, which is at symbol EMIN8ING. She will be talking about Kundalini and also how she interprets information and her experiences with music, poetry, and combining this. We will also be having another guest speaker. We are lining up an author you may know. He's also part of the community, R.N. Voot, who's in the house, as you will see his symbol. And he will be talking about his research and also his books. And the best way, if you really want to know about these people, is to find out how they're passionate about their topics. We've just recently put together the Perceptions Today podcast. And on that, if you find it on the podcast apps, whether it be Anchor, Spotify, or even YouTube or iTunes or Stitcher, go to the second actual episode, which is called From a Drop to an Ocean, and you will find the people talking along with a number of other people who are with our community, and you will find out exactly how they are on their topics and what that really means to them. So, tonight, our guest and community member is Paranormal Blip, and if you would like to come forth and take the stage.
Come forth and take the stage, young man. Thank you very much, Perceptions Today. So before I begin, I just want to... Exactly, yeah, I know. That was a bit of a build-up.
That's it. Talk over the guest. That's what we always do here. Just be a problem.
Oh, dear. So now, listen, before I get into the meat of it, I just want to say welcome to Philip, my brother, who has joined us. I think this is the first time he's heard one of these Twitter spaces, so that's really good. My brother Phil is the person that organized the audiobook for our parents' book, The Children That Time Forgot. So that I heard that audiobook in the last week in preparing for this, and it's a very good audiobook. So thank you, Phil, and welcome. And also an old friend of mine, Social Distancer. There he is, beautiful logo there. So I just want to kind of shout out those two people that have joined in the last 10 minutes or so. So welcome, everybody, and welcome to all the new people tonight.
Hang on. What's beautiful logo?
The Social Distancer logo. Can you see that? It says Social Distancer, and it's a kind of, how would you describe it? Kind of post-apocalyptic landscape.
Oh, I see. It was lower down in my scrolling list. It's okay.
Yeah,
I found
I'm
it
not
now.
making it up, Paul.
Good evening to Pete's brother. And good evening to the Social Distancers and all the new people, of course. Continue. I will be butting in at different points, as you know, as we agreed.
Yes, that's what I expect nothing less. So also as well, if you're new and you didn't get me, catch me saying this 10 minutes ago, I've got a bit of a cough, so I'm going to be using the mute button a little bit, and hopefully I won't cough, in your faces, as it were. Right. So,
sorry, I'm going to have to butt in now because I forgot to put in the best bit so far. Paranormal Blip will be doing a monologue first off with some information, and after that he'll be announcing that you can put your hands up to actually ask questions, and we're quite happy to normally answer questions at any point, but we're just going to let, obviously, if I shut up as well, obviously let Pete talk first.
Yeah, I love the way you're interrupting me by saying to other people that are patiently listening, don't interrupt me, don't interrupt Paranormal Blip. He does that, doesn't he? I know, it's unbelievable. Somebody is interrupting me by saying that somebody that interrupts me is being rude. Work that out. It's like 3D chess down here. Now, listen, before we get to the meat of it, we're avoiding the meat. But before we get to the meat of it, I do want to say that there is a kind of prepared discussion or a prepared presentation that I have, which I will speak about. But as you all know, all you regulars know, it isn't really true to one of these spaces if we don't have hands up all the way through. So, of course, I'm very happy for perceptions and for centered awareness to facilitate any hands up if they do go up and I don't quite see it or whatever. So, if you've got a question, you don't need to think, I've got to wait until the end or whatever. Just put your hand up. And for the new guys, I know that Perceptions just mentioned that, but on the bottom, there's a little heart icon with a plus next to it. If you press that, then you can get a hand, and if you press onto the hand, you can talk. Yeah, so that's how that works. Right. So my name is Pete, and I am the host and creator of a podcast called Paranormal Blip. Paranormal Blip started in July, and we're 11 episodes in. There's a rumored 12th episode, which is quite a bit of work, so I haven't actually got around to doing it yet. But 12th episode is going to be really great, by the way, when I eventually get around to doing it. We've looked at near-death experiences, UAPs, in lots of kind of different forms, or like UAPs and nuclear weapons, for instance. We've looked at remote viewing. We've looked at the shadow biosphere. And my most popular episode is me reading a sci-fi short story from the early 70s called Chains of the Sea. And Chains of the Sea has got a particular resonance within the UAP community. UAP, by the way, if you're kind of in the consciousness kind of area of looking into the phenomena, UAP stands for unidentified aerial phenomena. Okay, so what used to be called UFOs, people are trying to move away from UFO because of the stigma of that name, and they're now calling it UAPs. So this guy called Gardner Dozois wrote this sci-fi short story in the early 70s, and Lou Elizondo has repeatedly said, take a look at that short story, because it kind of, there may be something in there. Lou Elizondo is the guy that basically ran the US government's UAP department secretly for years, before resigning in 2017 and giving his story to Leslie Kean in the New York Times, December 2017, which is kind of like a landmark moment in what's called disclosure, the kind of making public the US government's attempts at understanding unidentified aerial phenomena. So I read out this story, Chains of the Sea, and that's kind of wildly, easily far more popular than anything else I've put up on Paranormal Blip. It's not even my work, So yeah, there you go. That says that. So that's Paranormal Blip, and we will get to episode 12 at some point, maybe next weekend, not sure. But it's quite a big plan. Basically, the idea for episode 12 is that I'm going to talk about Jeffrey Mishlov's award-winning, kind of like, he came first in the competition that Robert Bigelow ran, a kind of essay writing competition. And the idea of the essays was to kind of show evidence for consciousness surviving physical death. And Jeffrey Mishlove, for a good while now, like 25 years or 30 years, has been interviewing people around consciousness and near-death experiences and a whole host of different things for his show Thinking Aloud, which I think was on TV. And then on YouTube for years now, he's been doing New Thinking Aloud.
It was on PBS, Aloud. The American channel.
PBS, yeah.
Yeah, and you can get both on YouTube, and also there is their podcast and YouTube site, both is on there.
Yes, exactly. So he drew. It's an excellent essay. I can see why it won first place. And he drew from his kind of first person interviews, essentially, a lot of the time. There's one interview with Oprah there, but most of the interviews he cites in his essay are ones that he has done. So that's the idea for episode 12. And I will also be speaking about Anthony Peake's essay for the same competition, which is also outstanding. His idea of shooting the ferryman, which is an incredible, essentially like Groundhog Day. We keep living the same life over and over and over again. And his essay is excellent as well. And Perceptions put that on to Google, and there's links on. Well, I've linked to it on my Twitter, and so has Perceptions. So that's kind of easy to find as well.
It's also in the link tree, actual descriptions of both Paranormal Blip, myself as well. If you just click onto the bio of the Twitter one here, and then go down to the links as well.
That's right. Yeah, thank you. I forgot about that, Paul. Okay, so that's
why I'm here
Blip.
To interrupt.
Beautiful
exactly
timing.
My purpose.
Beautiful timing. So that's Paranormal Blip, the podcast. So I've known about reincarnation for a long time because my parents and Phil's parents wrote a book called, it's firstly published, it was called Life Before Birth, but they found that in the bookshops, it was being put in pregnancy, in the kind of pregnancy area. Yeah. So they thought, oh, this isn't working. This isn't working. So let's rename it something else. They came up with the name The Children That Time Forgot. And so I kind of, we both, I think Phil can maybe, I don't know, who knows whether Phil will agree with me or not. But I think it's fair to say that, the idea of reincarnation was kind of like.
You could ask him to come up and say something if you want.
Phil, come up and say something if you want.
Put your hand up so I can spot you.
What's Phil going to do? It's a tension-filled atmosphere. But whilst Phil's wondering whether he wants to talk. Okay, brilliant. Are you okay? Can you hear me okay? Oh, I think Perceptions has just muted himself. All right, cool. So anyway, reincarnation, because they were writing this book, it was in the air. It wasn't particularly controversial, I don't think, as an idea for us children, because our parents were kind of highly invested in it. Now, one thing to say about my mum, and I speak about this in episode 1, my mum was, she wasn't really a kind of, she had out-of-body experiences. She had a strange connection with electricity. So, for instance, a digital watch would just mess up on her wrist. And other watches, even like the other watches, whatever they run from, I have no idea. There's plenty of people who know about how a watch runs.
Piezo, quartz, electric.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So any watch would just like muck up on her wrist, basically. Having said that, she was kind of like she trained as a journalist. She was had a kind of journalistic tendency, if you like. So the research that she does in the book, and I'll talk about some of the cases in a moment, it was like she did go through a kind of thorough filtering system for the cases in the book. Okay. So although she herself had this kind of probably an inkling into, obviously very open-minded and interested in reincarnation and the paranormal, she was a Catholic and she was brought up a Catholic and she was a Catholic all her life, a practicing Catholic for the great majority of her life. There was that kind of journalistic tendency and that kind of sense of, basically kind of working out the truth, like any good researcher, obviously. So, but at the same time, I kind of knew about reincarnation from a very early age because of this book that they wrote it came out when I was about 8, I think, something like that. So, and then when my father died in 2015, I started to get really interested in near-death experiences. So near-death experiences and reincarnation, they're the kind of areas that I know the most about. And my friend, Social Distancer, actually sent me a really intriguing interview with Dan Aykroyd in, I think it was January or maybe February this year. And Dan Aykroyd basically kind of believes in all of it. And he's very engaging, charismatic. It's Dan Aykroyd, do you know what I mean? Incredibly charismatic guy. And I thought, oh, maybe there's something into all of this, So for the first time, I started to look into UAPs. And that's the kind of story of where I'm at the moment, basically. So let's now turn to The Children That Time Forgot. And I'm looking, just to say, co-hosts, I'm looking at the prepared notes that I have here. So I'm going to miss hands, okay? So just
a quick one for you. We will look for those. And also above, you've been talking about DOP, which we've put the shared link in the top section for you, as in the Division of Perceptual Studies for later on, because of Ian Stevenson. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect.
And also I've put in there Jim B. Tucker, who is kind of the person who took over the kind of role afterwards. So lo and behold, those are all preset up there for people to, if they want to look and listen at the same time. So carry on.
Excellent. Thank you very much for doing that, Paul. So let's now turn to this book. It's called The Children That Time Forgot. So I'm going to talk about some of the cases, from my point of view, the most interesting cases. There's lots and lots of cases, about, I don't know how many, but like about 35 cases, okay? And all of them like I say, there's something in all of them, but I'm just going to focus on the ones that I find the most interesting. So the first one is chapter 3. This is a girl called Mandy Seabrook, and this is probably the strongest in terms of evidence. It's kind of an incredible story. So this girl, Mandy Seabrook, okay. So there's this heterosexual couple in Leeds in the 1970s. Picture the scene. Leeds in West Yorkshire in the 1970s. And this couple have a child, a girl. And the girl is ill and the girl dies. And she's very young. I think she's only about just over a year old, but very essentially a baby. And she dies. And then the kind of distress and, kind of like obviously, totally life-changing experience for the parents. They split up. And years later, about 5 years later, the mother, who's now married to another man who himself has got a couple of kids, she then has another child. Okay? So this other girl that they call her Mandy, which was the name of the first girl that lived to only a year or so before she died. Now, when Mandy is about 2.5 or 3 or something like that, quite young, they are in a car, they're driving down from Leeds, they're driving down south. And so it's an area that this girl has never been to, and it's like a new road actually, which passes by a cemetery. And the girl, who is on her mother's lap in the front passenger seat of the car, leaps off the lap and says, "That's where you buried me, Mummy," looking at the cemetery that's whizzing by, because they're in a car. Or I should say that they are whizzing by. The cemetery is not whizzing by, but they're whizzing by in the car. And of course, when a child says that, they're kind of dumbstruck. They kind of say, what do you mean? All of this is like, of course, the detail is in the book in terms of the conversation, as recalled by the mum. But essentially they're saying, what do you mean? What do you mean? What it comes down to is that this girl says, "You buried me, and that's when I was here before. That's when I was Mandy number 1. And she has always looked like, when she was born, it was striking how much she looked like the first Mandy. She had her tooth, there was a tooth in her mouth as a newborn baby that had kind of grown a little bit. And also there was something about her hair, the way that her hair curled, which was exactly like these physical characteristics that Mandy 1 had. Okay? And then she said, "You nearly fell into the grave. You nearly fell on top of me when I was in the hole." And this, her mum was kind of taken aback by that, because at the funeral of her first child, it had been raining heavily and it was slippy, and she actually did nearly she was like overcome by grief, She actually did nearly fall into the grave. And then she said to her dad, and now this is a different dad to Mandy 1's dad, she said to her dad about his son, who I think might be called Charlie. I don't have it in the notes, but I think it might be Charlie. Maybe it's Charlie. I think it might be Charlie. Let's go with Charlie.
We won't.
Let's go with Charlie. No, Phil's going to interrupt. It wasn't Charlie. Anyway, so she says, "Charlie can walk now. He's fine, and he's gone home, and he can walk now." Now, Charlie was a son of the father who died, who had a physical disability, which meant that he couldn't walk, and he died as a young child. Okay. Now, this aspect really got under, obviously shocked the dad. Yeah. And you think, what is going on here? Do you know what I mean? What is going on here? And she also said something which is absolutely incredible. So it's this level of detail in her kind of, just like, it's all kind of spontaneous, voluntary stuff. She's just saying this stuff, yeah? It's like the seeing the cemetery sparked this kind of burst of memories, if you like, yeah? And she's just saying this stuff. And the response from the parents is essentially like, what are you talking about type thing, very disbelieving, can't really believe there is. Now, she also said this incredible thing about she said that she was buried with a woolen ball, a ball made of wool, a yellow ball made of wool. And the mum remembered, well, there was a yellow ball made of wool. That's really difficult to say. It's like a tongue twister. There was a yellow ball made of wool that her Mandy one's cousin, who was like a couple of years older and at primary school, had made as a gift for the sick child, But then Mandy died, and the cousin really wanted to put it in the coffin. But Mandy said, no, Mandy's mum said, no, you can't do that. We're not going to do that. And unbeknownst to her, she then later kind of confessed this or admitted this, unbeknownst to any of the adults, during the wake where the coffin was open for a good couple of hours in the house in Leeds in the 70s, she stuck it in. She literally put this little woolen ball that she'd made at primary school, stuck it under the dead baby. And so she was buried with this woolen ball, yeah, according to the cousin that had made this ball. And nobody knew that. But Mandy too said, I was buried with the ball, given to me by the cousin, like naming the cousin, They go to the cousin and she says, well, actually I did a sneaky one. So so that is there's lots of kind of corresponding evidence there, which there's something going on there. Yeah, there's something going on. So hold on a second, I just need to cough.
Meanwhile, we'll hum some little music in as an intro just to cover up this. By the way, let's just take a quick poll. 100% everyone being fascinated by these stories?
That's a leading question.
You've got to go with positive marketing.
I have a question.
Thank you, Gabe.
Is because before we come here, we supposedly choose who our parents are. In the story, is there anything that says why she chose?
I've been hearing a lot, just to let you know, Paul.
Hang on one second, Mike. You're having audio difficulties. Did you have your hand up, or has you just gone off mute without realizing?
Yeah, I just went off mute. I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, Mike. You sound like you got a pillow over your microphone, so it's a bit of a difficult one to pick up.
Oh, okay. Can you hear
That's
me
better.
now?
Getting better.
Okay.
Getting clearer.
I hear you perfectly. I just haven't heard anything else. Just you.
Just me. You haven't heard anything for how long?
You can't hear me, Mike.
Most of the call.
Can you hear me, Mike?
Just I don't know if anyone else is having that issue.
Okay. Thanks for Paul. It doesn't seem as if he can hear me.
No, hang on one second, Mike. If you want to try and drop out of the room and then come back into the room, because other people have been hearing Paranormal Blip, it might just be your connection. We'll wait for you. We won't go anywhere.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'll join right back. Thank you.
Feel free to cough.
I do.
No.
Sorry.
Hopefully, if there's somebody in the house that can help you if there's a problem. Otherwise, we can't reach you in time. So, as I was saying, are we all in getting fascinated by the stories? Because there is going to be a lot more content coming up. I just unfortunately closed my bit. Good. Excellent, Gabe. Good.
Ask whether they can hear me, Paul.
Well, I'll do that one. I would like to see people use the 100% symbol for those who can actually hear anyone apart from me. Yeah, we're getting them. Now let's try with
Fantastic.
Mike. Excellent.
What about Phil? Phil, can you hear me?
Is Phil familiar with putting a hand up or a 100% symbol for the icon?
No, he's never used this
Phil's been here.
Maybe
Okay, so Phil, at the bottom of the screen, if you go for the heart symbol, and then press that, you'll find that you get another set of options. Far left, you'll find a 100% symbol and a hand symbol. Excellent. Good. You found it. Excellent. So if you want to talk, then
Brilliant.
obviously put your hand up. Let's check Mike to see. Check Mike. That's not as good, is it? Mike, can we hear you now?
Yeah, I'm hearing you fine. Can you hear me okay?
I can. Let's see if you can hear Paranormal Blip. And then if you can hear Paranormal Blip, respond to Paranormal Blip.
Can you hear me, Mike? Mike, can you hear me? Mic check. This is a mic check. Hey,
I don't think
obvious
I could.
joke.
I'll try to
He
rejoin
can't hear you. Okay,
Unbelievable.
Melissa,
Everyone else
can
is
you
thinking
talk?
lucky Mike.
Hang on one second. Mike,
Yeah.
listen
can
to
hear
Melissa
you.
and see if Melissa, you can hear Mike, and then both of you talk to each other.
Hi, Mike. Can you hear me? Hello, hello, hello. I don't think you can hear me. I think Mike is the only one that can't hear anyone but yourself.
This is fascinating, Mike. You've got a direct connection to me, but nobody else. This is bizarre.
Okay, 100%. If you find this fascinating, everyone.
It is. It's the Archons. Now, Mike, if you've got a laptop, run your laptop and see if you can get the audio from the laptop. And then when you want to talk, pause that.
Sounds good. I'll try that.
How close are you to your laptop?
It's right in front of me. I'll join forthwith. I'll let you know.
Excellent.
Beautiful use of the word forthwith there, Mike, although you can't hear me praise you. Right, I'll go on to the next case then, forthwith, shall I?
Before you do, can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
So,
Yes, of course.
anyway, because apparently, supposedly, before we come down here, we choose our parents. So I'm just curious if the child mentioned anything about why the soul chose the second father, yet chose to leave with the first. Is there anything mentioned about that?
Sorry, I was on mute. Then I was checking my notes. Now, there is that. No, not in that case. But later on, I do talk about soul groups. So that not for the Mandy case, no. But my parents, Mary and Peter, as I like to call them, do write about. My mum was the writer, and my dad edited them. But so my mum does write about that later on in the book, and I do talk about that in a bit, but not for the Mandy case, no.
Okay, and then this screen keeps flipping up and down. We've got someone who has a question.
Blurry. Yeah, Blurry's got a hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I don't like that.
Hi, good afternoon. I came up to help you guys with the glitch that is common today. So the person who had no sound, what could happen, what the co-host can do is remove the person from speaker and put them to listener and ask them to leave the broadcast and come back in, and that normally fixes the entire sound issue. And the host has the power too. So if the person cannot hear a group of people, just go ahead and remove them to listener, not out of the broadcast, and then ask them to come back up, and it seems to fix it. Does that make sense?
Excellent, Blurry. Yeah, we were telling them to actually bounce out themselves and come back in again. We'll now see if that's actually worked. So, Mike, I'm going to take away your speech capability and then give it back to
quite
you.
Radical.
Okay.
I've taken it away, and here go back to a listener. Then I'll find him because his icon's moved. I now give you the power of speech. All right, let's check that.
If that doesn't work, then ask him to leave the broadcast altogether and then come back in.
Your audio is fading in and out, unfortunately, Blurry. So it sounds like you're on a.
I will drop down to listener. Good luck.
Oh, don't worry. Thank you very much. I mean, it's always nice to see you here. Right, Mike,
Blurry, are you still there? Can I ask Blurry a question quickly before you disappear, Blurry? Whereabouts in the world are you? Because
I can hear you now.
Oh, wicked. Where are you, Blurry?
I am on the West Coast, Southern California.
Beautiful. Because it's evening here in the UK. Well, welcome. Thank you very much for your...
Paranormal Blip, do you want me to tell you where you live? You got lost on your country there.
I wanted to do a spin on the way that I said UK, so I ran up to it before spinning it. But anyway, what was I going to say? Oh, look, she's going down to listener now. But
It was making sure Mike's okay, and then we can continue from where you are, because I think everyone's now back in.
Exactly, yeah. Right, so let's get on with it. So,
did you just check? Did Mike hear or not? We were going to just check Mike.
I think Mike said he can hear now. Yeah.
Yeah, he mentioned that he can hear now.
Right, that's good. I've sent him back the invite. Notice how slick this whole process works. Okay, so where is he now? His icon's moved. Right, good. Mike, one quick check.
I hear you now.
Can you hear Paranormal Blip?
Unfortunately, I can't. There's something very quirky going on. I'll just stay on listening mode on my headset.
Oh my God, that's crazy.
Just listen. So don't let me
but you can't hear.
Disrupt anymore, please. But thank you.
Don't worry about it. We have more disruptions than you could possibly imagine in here. We're all quite happy. We're not all tied to time. So you couldn't hear Paranormal Blip at all, and you couldn't hear Melissa at all.
Right. I can only hear
on phone.
Headset. Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So we've got him on the laptop now, so that's okay.
Okay, great. Right. Okay, let's get on with it.
Roll on.
Roll on. Right. So next case is a very interesting aspect to this case that I just want to, kind of pass over almost. I mean, it's incredible. Like, the implications of this, you could write books and books and books about, but I'm just going to pass over it. So one of the cases is, it's kind of like a typical, if you know the kind of typical reincarnations case would be a child, between the age of maybe 2.5 and 5. Spontaneously, they say something like, what happened to my other mummy, or when I was born before, that kind of thing. So a lot of the cases are that world of, kind of how the children start to talk about this. One case involved this child that remembered being in what she called heaven. And she contextualized that by saying that the mum says, well, what do you mean, like heaven? Why do you say heaven? Why do you call it heaven? And the girl says, well, you call it heaven. We didn't call it anything. It's just where we lived. But you call it heaven. Now, you must remember, obviously, if you're listening to, as we are in 2021, these are cases all of them are from Britain, and they are from the late 70s, early 80s. The book was published first in 1983. So, it's like most of the people that contacted my parents had this idea of heaven, whether they were kind of practicing Christians or not. Heaven is the word that, most people in Britain, that part of, in that era, would call some kind of afterlife plane or whatever. Yeah. So the girl says, you call it heaven. And she says that she can remember Jesus. And she says, the mum says, well, what was Jesus like? And she uses the most beautiful word that I've ever heard used to describe Jesus. I said that well. Shall I get to the word? Laughy. 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 And you kind of think, yeah, I can see that, man. Jesus is probably incredibly charismatic and probably quite funny, probably laughing all the time. I'd be laughing if I was Jesus. So there's something extraordinary about that description of Jesus in this girl's remembering what she kind of knew as home and what she kind of explained to her parents as heaven. And she said, basically like, that's where I came from and that's where I'm going to go back to. And he wasn't there all the time, but he was there. Like sometimes he was there and he was laughy. So that's a nice little case, isn't it? Yeah, beautiful case. Children that time forgot. Now, another one is, again, in this kind of heaven realm, the kind of realm between lives, if you like. And this is a boy that talks about water and talks about how when he was given a kind of heads up that he was going to be born, like just before he was going to be born, and he went into the river to be born. He was told in advance. And he had, and this is like connects to what centered awareness was talking about. He had this, he knew that there was a soul group, essentially what's kind of known as a soul group. So that's a group of people that you live over and over and over with, like different lives, okay? And your relationship may be different. So in one life, you might be brothers, Phil, okay? Give us a heads up. And in the next life, we might be wives. But, you know, whatever the kind of relationship between the souls might change, yeah? But you've got this kind of core group of 5 or 6. I don't know, actually, maybe folks on the call can clarify that, what the kind of mean number is or whatever. But as far as I know, there's about 5 or 6 core people that you're going to meet, usually as an adult. And these people, although their personalities and their relationships change, you know, those are your soul group. So you go life after life after life with the same people. And he said that although he knows that some of his friends in heaven were born at the same time as him, and although he hadn't met them yet, he knew, he had this very strong feeling that he will meet them in life and that he will know who they are as well, you know, when he meets them, which is, you know, well, it's fascinating, isn't it? Absolutely incredible. And connected to that again in this kind of like heaven realm is a boy that remembers water making a noise, water singing. And I've heard NDEs that describe NDA testimony, near-death experience testimony, that describe the same thing, that when you go into water and when you kind of play around with water and when it kind of pours around, it's not water that we know. It's kind of like moves differently and it makes a sound. It, like as this boy says, it sings. And the flowers and the plants make a noise. They sing. I think it might be even Alexander. Some aspects of his near-death experience have got some kind of music. Does anyone remember that? Is there music connected to that one? I think maybe there is, but maybe I'm misremembering that. So anyway, so that's the kind of heaven, the soul group area that my parents write about. Now, this is another really interesting case. So this is a newborn baby, another Mandy, actually. This girl is called Mandy Hartley. And right from the very beginning of her life, like right from the beginning when she was born, her mother said that she had this exceptional awareness. And this is a quote from the book. So this is like just after she was born, handed to her mother, and her mother says, she actually seemed to look at me and say, "Who are you?" So she seemed to understand everything. Now, of course, that is a quote from the book. She actually seemed to look at me and say, "Who are you?" So it seemed to the mother that the girl looked at her and said, "Who are you?" She doesn't state, you know, because it seemed that happened. She doesn't state that the girl actually
You're
said.
talking facial expressions, etc. The way that she was looking at her, yeah? That's the way you're going for it.
That's how I read it, yeah. You know, she doesn't say she actually said, "Who are you?" So, but anyway, that kind of sense of awareness and, you know, kind of extraordinary alertness. And she, like, right from the very beginning, she seemed to understand everything. The mother says, like, you know, she just had this baby thing, like, down. You know, she knew what to do as a baby. Basically, like, everything was kind of like, oh, yeah, you know, there was a role that is to be played as a baby, and she did that role. There was no surprise. It doesn't seem to be anything that could kind of ruffle her or surprise her, or nothing kind of like, you know, all the unpredictabilities of life. It was just like, oh yeah, I've kind of done this so many times. And weirdly, in her case, and also in another case, in her case, her mother, so the mother's mother-in-law came to visit. So the kind of grandmother-in-law or whatever, I don't know what they're called, you know, that kind of, if you can imagine that branch of the family tree, the mother's mother-in-law, she came to visit the new, you know, the newborn baby and the mother in hospital. She looked at the baby and she said, "You're Foxy. You've been on this earth before," which is really interesting. And that happened again in another one of these cases in the book, where a random stranger just sees this newborn baby, somebody that's not known by the family, another old woman, and said to the baby, "You've been on this earth before." So I don't know. I mean, the obvious question there is, are there people that have got some kind of whatever, like ability to?
Well, it also might be just the aura of the actual person interacting, like two magnets. Suddenly you're finding that connection that you realize there is something there, rather than the physical description of the person.
That's interesting too, because my mother was saying that when my brother was born, that the nurse looked at him and said, he's been here many times. And because some people have been here more than others. And it's interesting because when I went to a psychic, she said to me, are you the youngest? And I said, no. She says, you have a very young energy. She says, you're an old soul, but you have a very young energy. But you haven't been here as many times as your brother has. And lots of times I have felt like I'm older than him by 3 years, but lots of times I have felt like he's older than me. And
that's incredible. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's incredible. Yeah.
And
amazing.
And I've also and she said that my sister has been here many times before myself as well. And that's interesting because we used to work together and people always thought that she was older than me. Like, just customers that would come and grab a coffee because my parents used to have a cafe. So we used to work in the cafe together. And they knew that we were sisters, but they always thought she was older than me. So that was interesting too.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah. And I wonder if there is some kind of vibe or, something. Well, obviously, I mean, that's what you're describing, isn't it? There's some property that's being picked up.
Yeah, I think it's energy. I think it's just you just picking up your sense of energy, and some people have a more sensitive sense to energy, and they pick it up. Or other
if you're going to go down,
auras.
Well, yeah, if you're going down to the fact of all energy moves, so you got that vibration bit, it's that signature, because we don't know how the body picks up consciousness, and as we say, that the body's possibly a receiver and it needs a signal. It's the signal that the other people are kind of picking up on more than the actual physical mass of the body, which is biological.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so now there's one other case from the Children That Time Forgot that I want to just talk about, because towards the end of the book, and Phil he won't confirm it because it doesn't look as if he was going to bless us all with his amazing voice. But, by the way, it's Phil's oldest son's birthday today, whose name is Oscar. So let's just pause, pause everything, and let's just put a thing up for Oscar here. What should we do, a wave? Let's do a wave.
I think you can put a wave up for Oscar using the heart and then going for the wave.
Beautiful, a wave or 100% or something. Oscar's 15. Oscar is the best of all of the cousins, but all of my nephews and nieces, but don't tell the other nephews and nieces that, please, Phil. But he's the best, isn't he? Yeah, let's just face it. Let's face facts.
Little info for you.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday to Phil. A direct message that's just come in, which will add to the conversation. Gabe has been saying that right. His babysitter's mother, hang on, my babysitter's mother, who was in her 80s, used to call him little old man. So we're going back to the same bit of recognizing somebody who's been around before. So that could be fascinating to add to the information pile.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just to clarify, it's not Phil's birthday. It's Phil's son's Oscar's birthday. But,
he can have a present as well. We don't want him feeling left out.
Thank you, Gabe, for sending that. It's really, I wonder how, I mean, it's quite a specific thing, isn't it? And only in these, I mean, that's the amazing thing about these spaces. You don't kind of ordinarily in your day-to-day life come across the environment where you can speak about this kind of stuff, so it's great. I wonder how kind of what's the word, populous? No, not populous. What
how
I'm getting
popular
at. Oh, that's the word.
How frequent.
How frequent.
We don't know those options. Renegade is just throwing in information. I don't know if Renegade wants me to read this out or whether you want to do it yourself, Renegade. Do you want to speak? as this will be additional?
Please, you can do it for me, Paul.
On
Your
Renegade's
English is much
behalf, I
better
will
than
be
mine.
using my best Dutch accent.
You can simplify this more easier than I do.
Okay. Shall I use my Dutch accent? Because I haven't got one. Right. Renegade says
Or
that
your
Dali...
Cockney accent. Also good.
I can't even do a Cockney accent. So, anyway, Renegade is saying that Dali believed he was the reincarnation of his dead brother. Dali's mother gave birth to her first son in 1901, a child that she named Salvador, and who died of gastroenteritis at 22 months old. 9 months after the child's death, the Salvador we know was born and took his dead brother's name. Dali was told by his parents at the age of 5 that he was the reincarnation of his brother, a belief he carried on into his adult life. So the question is, how much is being influenced by subliminal suggestion and the action of parents? In other words, how can you trust the message from the children? That's what Renegade has said. And thank you very much, Renegade, for putting that forward.
I'll tell you, children are very intuitive. That's how they learn. And they're going to be very open because they haven't been here long enough to have their walls up. So that's what my belief is, that children are naturally intuitive.
But he's also saying whether the parents are influencing the child at the same time. So let's see what Paranormal Blip says.
Well, I think, I mean, if you look at it from a kind of case point of view, one case, and you're not there, you're not present, then of course there's a whole, number of questions you can bring to that case, thinking, who said what then, what was suggested, blah, 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 blah. But then you look at some of the cases I'm going to be talking about in a bit, and I would say the Mandy case has got enough about it where you've got, people that couldn't know anything, like Mandy, they never spoke about the boy that died, the physically disabled boy that died. Like, obviously, they're not going to talk. I mean, maybe it isn't obvious, but they never spoke about this boy. Literally, that boy didn't exist from the point of Mandy 2's perspective, yep? But she knew about him. They never knew about the yellow ball, So, but that happened, yeah. That was in the coffin because the girl said it was, yeah. So, of course, you can kind of, think, well, is there enough evidence to support this happening? We'll, in a minute, get on to talking about the physical evidence. So, this birthmarks. I've got a great story I'm going to tell you in a minute. One of Ian Stevenson's cases, where anybody approaching this who hasn't kind of made up their own mind that it doesn't happen, anyone that comes in with an open mind and looks at it like you do anything else with a kind of, where's the evidence type thing, then I think a lot of these cases are convincing. And the DOPS, the Division of Perceptual Studies at the University of Virginia that Stevenson set up in the late 60s, 67, they've been doing this since 67, They've got 1,500 cases that they call solved, okay? So there's enough evidence that convinces these guys that there's something in 1,500 cases. And of course, this is in the backlog. I mean, we haven't even been speaking for an hour, and we've already got anecdotal evidence of these weird, things happening. Do you know what I mean? So if it was in a kind of world where it was absolutely fine to talk about it, and interesting, Jewish communities and in Hindu communities in India, where Stevenson did lots of his work, where reincarnation is accepted and there isn't this kind of stigma about talking about it, people are just like, oh yeah, of course it happens. You know what I mean? So then of course people are going to be more inclined to share because they're not going to think I'm crazy. And of course, what centered awareness's point is partly is that, and all of the cases in my parents' book and all of the cases that DOPS, the Division of Perceptual Studies, look at, and all of Stevenson's cases, or at least most of them, are young children. Yeah. So it's this idea that something happens that sparks a memory of a previous life. It might be just that the memory's there and then they get to the stage where they can articulate it. Yeah. If you look at the evidence or the data, It's just when children have got the ability to articulate what is on their mind when they start talking about this previous life. So,
The good thing,
in summary, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, the good thing is you could also look at the fact of telepathy, but the fact that the child was talking about a ball of wool that had been put in, which the mother and other people didn't know about, it couldn't be the child pulling information from the parent's head at that point, because they wouldn't have that information, which is a good point.
That's right, yeah. And my mum actually talks about telepathy. She goes through all possible, and she uses the Mandy case as well. Like, my mum thought it was the strongest case in the book, I think. Although the first story, Nicola, which I haven't mentioned, Nicola Wheater, who we met actually, I don't know if Phil isn't going to jump on, but Phil probably remembers that. Certainly I remember going up to north to Keighley in Yorkshire. We were living in London at the time, or certainly in the south somewhere. And when the book came out, there was this kind of big publicity drive by the publishers. So my parents took all of the kids up to Keighley to do interviews with this girl, Nicola, and Nicola's mum. And Nicola's reincarnation story was that she was hit by a train. She had this like terrifying there was a TV show with a train in it, basically. And she was like absolutely, totally freaked out by it. And that was the kind of thing that, she was kind of talking about, I've been hit by one of those things. And interestingly enough, a couple of days ago, doing the research for this, and I must thank Perceptions Today, like from the bottom of my heart. That's supposed to sound genuine, but it doesn't sound genuine at all. But this really beautiful thing happened over the weekend that is on my Twitter feed, right? So if you want to watch these videos, follow me. I don't know, most of you probably do follow me, but go to my tweets. And this was Sunday, so a couple of days ago. I was preparing for this. I typed in one of the names in YouTube, one of the names of the cases in my parents' book. And so, I thought, oh, well, just like totally speculatively. And I came up with this video and I watched it. And it's like this it's a documentary that was made by an Australian production company. I think it's connected to this Australian reincarnation researcher called Peter Ramster, I think that's his name, that my parents were in contact with. I remember the name, like in the back of my head somewhere. And essentially it's like one of those things on YouTube where it's all like, it's not very well archived. It's like, 7 minutes here, 7 minutes there, 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there. So you don't have the entire documentary. It's just like bits. But in the bit about Nicola, the first case in my folks' book, my mum just pops up and starts talking. Now, my mum died in 2002. I don't have any footage of my mum. Yeah, I can't remember what her voice is because she died so long ago. So it was incredible to see, like in this speculative YouTube search, to see my mum jump up, and she does an interview with the presenter, and she says, whatever she says. So I was about to do a terrible Scottish accent there, but I stopped myself out of respect for my mother. And so it was really lovely to see that, really beautiful to see that. But that kind of, so, they were kind of in the media a little bit. She did lots of interviews, and some of those interviews were with Nicola. And in fact, in that on the YouTube clip that I link, they bring the documentary filmmakers bring Nicola back to the I mean, it's a bit mad, really, if you think about it, but they bring her back to the area on the train tracks where she was bloody killed, 100 years ago, or whatever. So, yeah, that's Nicola. So anyway, let me just return, if it's okay, Paul, to my notes here.
Well, thank you very much for saying that. I mean, it's just synchronicity that we decided to do this and everything seems to roll in. And we talk about that a lot within this environment, which is just amazing, the things that turn up just because life has just rolled us into each other's sphere at the moment. And you wouldn't have been able to know that from your childhood, which is strange.
Sorry, Pete, before you go ahead, I need to go because I'm about to start work. And I'm spewing because I really wanted to hear more about what your parents had to say about birthmarks and soul groups. that this is a great space. Thank you everyone for coming. I think Paul mentioned we've got about 28 people in this room, so that's fantastic turnout.
There may be more listening on the browsers.
Yeah, but I will listen back. This is being recorded, isn't it, Paul?
This is being recorded, and again, snippets will be going to, or the whole thing will be put up somewhere in the podcast between us, Paranormal Blip, etc. So we won't lose anything from this conversation.
To help our research and understanding, leave Perceptions Today's podcast reviews, subscribe to the podcast, along with the other social media accounts, and share. Come and join our live events. That way we can get together and have thoughtful discussions along with advancing our understanding of concepts as we go along.